2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10. To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
It's good to have you here today. I thought of this after thinking about some things. My wife was reading a biography of Helen Keller. I've always been a big fan of Helen Keller. You remember Helen Keller? Her teacher was Miss Sullivan. Is that right? And do you remember the first word she spelled in her hand? It was water. Remember? She was pumping water into her hand and she was spelling water. Big breakthrough. Because Helen Keller was born both blind and dumb. Not meaning that she was dumb, but she couldn't hear. She couldn't hear and she could not see. And the big breakthrough came when she was able to communicate. And she was amazing. She just could not stop after she started learning. Remember? You know, she turned a minus into a plus. A minus into a plus. We have a good friend of our family and also your family, Ron Edgington, Harold Edgington's brother. Remember Ron? He's come and talked to us about the Mexico work. Well, a few years ago he found out he had lung cancer. The big C, they call it. He was very upset at first. There was an elder that was in the congregation that was a doctor and said, Ron, we're going to do the very best we can for you. And the congregation began to pray for him, and he got encouraged, and he went through the procedure. And you know, instead of going to the cancer center defeated, he went to the cancer center knowing that good things would happen. Instead of just sitting, you know, have you ever been in a doctor's office and you're just sitting in the seat and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting? Ron decided instead of just sitting around waiting, he would go and shake hands with everybody in there and encourage them, where you from, and he would talk about things, and he'd try to, and then finally, before you know it, they were calling him in. Amazingly, he is cancer-free now. Cancer-free. And guess what? You won't believe it. The cancer center where he went asked him to be a chaplain, to encourage people, because this is the kind of guy we need here. He turned a minus into a plus. And that's really what I'd like to talk about today. I think I've got 4 people I want to talk about that are in the Bible, and I'm sure you will leave today and understand something that has been very, very difficult for the world to understand. Why did Christ have to die on the cross? Let's start off with Paul. In 2 Corinthians 12, 7 and 10, Paul talked about this thorn in the flesh he had. Now, he was telling the Corinthians that he was able to go to the third heaven and he was able to see unspeakable things. That means that he was called up to where God was, and God told him, you cannot say or reveal the things that you've heard or seen today. You know, like John, you know, in the book of Revelation, he was told to write these things down, but Paul was told, no, you can't tell anybody what you saw and what you heard. And this is what he says to the Corinthians. To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. Have you ever really been pricked by a thorn? I mean, not one of those little babies. I mean one of those big boys. The other day, I've got some wire out in the backyard, and we used it to make a driveway. And you know that real heavy-duty wire that you put down, so it will strengthen the concrete? We had it leaning up against a tree. And I was mowing the grass, and I came up against them. And it's pretty heavy-gauge wire, and there was a hook on it. And it stuck in my skin and hooked, and it wouldn't come out. That hurt. And have you ever gotten a hook or something in your skin and just sort of pulled on it? Your skin is amazingly elastic. And I was pulling on it, going, and I thought, yikes. And it was hurting, but I wanted to get it out, so I was, and I finally had to unhook it. That's a thorn. Can you imagine carrying a thorn like that? Paul said he had a thorn in the flesh. 3 times he pleaded with God to take it away. But God told him, my grace is sufficient for you, because my power is made perfect in weakness. Let me get this right. I got this thorn in my flesh because you want me to be weak. But you want me to be weak so I can understand your power. Is that exactly what you're saying, God? That's what Paul said. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I'm strong. When he realizes that he can't do it by himself, he depends on God and he becomes strong. So in his weakness, he becomes strong. You see, I thought the same thing you're thinking right now. How does that work? Doesn't work in football. The strongest guy usually wins the battle. It doesn't work in the business world. The weakest spreadsheet usually isn't very profitable. But Paul said he had this thorn to make him weak so God could make him strong. Let's go to the next scripture. James 1, beginning in verse 9. The brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position. But the one who is rich should take pride in his low position, because he will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossoms fall and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich man will fade away even while he goes about his business. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Let's put this in perspective. You got a poor guy who depends on God, and his greatest possession is his relationship with God. The humble man in humble circumstances. His greatest asset is his relationship with God. Over here, you have the rich man. And his greatest asset is that he's rich. James says, this guy over here has a better chance. He has a better relationship with God than this man. This man ought to be happy that he has made that relationship with God. This guy ought to be sad because he never developed that relationship with God. Because in his own mind, he never needed God. In his weakness, he became strong. In his strength, he became weak. The next passage is Mark 12. Everybody knows this woman. Everybody knows this woman. And it is a perfect example of what I'm trying to say. It's perfect. In Mark 12, beginning of verse 41, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were being put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Remember the temple area. You had the temple proper, where you had the holy place and the most holy place, and then the outside court was the court of men, where only Jewish men could go, and then the outside court there was the court of the women, where Jewish women could go, and the outside court of there was the court of the Gentiles, where everybody could go. Just inside the court of women there was a treasury chest there. And as you would go to worship God, you would throw your treasury, your money in that treasure chest to take care of orphans and widows and take care of the temple for maintenance. So Jesus went and he sat down where they were throwing their money in. A poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins. Very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. You know, when I was a kid, we'd get these coupons in the mail. I don't know if you've ever looked at those coupons. In the very bottom corner it says, worth 1 mil. You know what 1 mil is? 1 mil is 1/10 of a penny. The coupons have to have intrinsic value. Some lawyer figured that out. 1 mil is 1/10 of a penny. What she put in, those 2 copper coins, worth a fraction of a penny. Okay? Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything she had to live on. Okay, let me tell you something about this lady. Here she is, a poor widow. That tells me she didn't have a husband. She was poor. Don't know about her kids, but they weren't helping her out. She had in her little purse 2 small coins. They weren't worth much, but they were hers. And she wanted to put those in the treasury of the Lord. She wanted to take care of the poor. In her weakness, her example became strong. Jesus Christ pointed her out to his disciples. And I just want you to think about this. I mean, just think about the worldwide implications of a poor lady putting in 2 little pieces of copper. Think about it with me. You got to think. Anytime we have missionaries come by that need money, anytime we have Christian college presidents that come and want money for their school, right? Who do they mention? Tell me the truth. That little lady has probably raised more money than any single example in the Bible. True or false? That little lady has touched your heart more than all the wealth in the world. True or false? In her weakness, God gave strength. We teach our kids how to be generous. We teach our kids how not to be selfish from that example. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that just say, wow, to you? One more person. John chapter 12. Jesus came from heaven, King of kings, Lord of lords. He assisted with God when he created this world. He came into his own received him not, right? He came as a little child. A little child. Do you know of anything more dependent than a baby? Do you know of anything that takes your heart better than a little baby? In your weakness, you grow strong. Jesus, in John chapter 12, explained how he was going to capture the world. Listen carefully. Now is the time for judgment